Let's be brutally honest here. The Indiana Fever's biggest win of the season didn't come because of Caitlin Clark. In fact, it came without her. That's right, the same rookie sensation who has dominated headlines, filled arenas, and driven TV ratings wasn't even on the floor when the Fever fought their way into playoff security against the LA Sparks. And yet, what unfolded in Los Angeles wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. A statement that this team is far deeper, far tougher, and far more resilient than the narrative most media outlets want to sell you. Because while Clark's absence might have been the obvious storyline, it was Aliyah Boston bruised, battered, but unshaken who stepped into the spotlight and showed everyone what leadership looks like when the stakes are highest. The Sparks had beaten Indiana 3 times already this season, each loss a little more humiliating than the last. Add in the fact that the Fever came in missing not just Clark, but also Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, and Ari McDonald, 4 guards, 4 playmakers, 4 voices in the rotation, and most critics had already penciled in another loss. On paper, it was supposed to be a disaster. But instead, it became the most important 40 minutes of basketball Indiana has played all year. Boston didn't just play well, she put together one of the most complete games of her professional career. 22 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and perhaps most impressively, 6 steals, the highest mark she's ever recorded. She attacked the Sparks' defense with the relentlessness of a superstar who wasn't going to accept another loss. She muscled through the paint, she facilitated when Kelsey Mitchell couldn't get into rhythm, and she ripped away possessions that turned into momentum-shifting points. And then, in the final moments, with everything on the line, she sealed the game with a defensive stop that silenced Los Angeles inside their own building. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was the way she carried herself, the way she looked into her teammates' eyes and told them, through her actions, that they were going to win this game together. And after the buzzer, when microphones were shoved in her face, she gave the line that every Fever fan has been repeating ever since. Next woman up. That wasn't just a cliche, it was the living truth of this game, a mantra that explained how a shorthanded Fever squad flipped the narrative, secured their spot in the playoff picture, and reminded the league that resilience is sometimes more dangerous than talent. Aliyah Boston didn't hold back in her words, and she certainly didn't hold back on the floor, and that's where the story of this playoff-clinching win begins. Not with who was missing, but with who refused to let Indiana fall apart. The first thing you need to understand about this win is just how unlikely it was. Walking into Los Angeles, the Fever weren't just underdogs. They were limping underdogs. Caitlin Clark, their offensive engine, their floor general, the player defenses build entire game plans around sat on the sidelines in street clothes, still recovering from that nagging groin injury, but she wasn't the only one. Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, and Ari McDonald were also unavailable. That's 4 guards, 4 ball handlers, 4 players who not only eat up minutes, but stabilize rotations when pressure mounts. Most teams in the WNBA don't survive that kind of attrition. In a playoff race this tight, missing half your backcourt should have been a death sentence. And yet, Indiana walked into the building with an attitude that can only be described as defiant. They didn't spend time making excuses. They didn't talk about what they didn't have. Instead, they focused on what was left: grit, trust, and the willingness to push beyond their comfort zones. Next woman up wasn't just Aliyah Boston's quote after the game, it was the Fever's lived reality. Whoever got minutes had to be ready to play out of role. Whoever touched the floor had to do more than what was written on the scouting report. That reality was magnified by the stakes. This wasn't some random August matchup. This was the game that could make or break Indiana's playoff cushion. Coming in, the Fever sat in 6th place, barely holding on to their spot in the standings. Meanwhile, Los Angeles was lurking in 9th, just 2 games back. The math was simple. Lose this game, and suddenly the Sparks are one hot streak away from knocking Indiana out. Win it, and you create breathing room while delivering a psychological blow to a team chasing you. And don't forget, the Sparks had owned the Fever all year. 3 meetings, 3 losses, each one uglier than the last. It wasn't just about the standings anymore, it was about pride. It was about proving they could solve a puzzle that had haunted them all season, and they had to do it without their biggest names in uniform. The outside world saw fragility, a team with too many holes, a roster that should crumble under pressure. But inside that locker room, the Fever saw something else. They saw an opportunity to redefine themselves, to show the league that their season wasn't built on one player or one star, but on a culture of resilience. That's why when the ball tipped off, it wasn't hesitation or fear that defined them. It was urgency. Every loose ball mattered. Every rebound mattered. Every possession carried the weight of their season. That's what made this win so monumental. Not just because of who they beat, or even how they did it, but because they proved that even when the odds are stacked to the ceiling, this group refuses to fold. If you want to grasp just how much pressure was riding on this matchup, you need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of the standings. The Indiana Fever didn't just need a win, they needed to stop the bleeding. Coming into Los Angeles, they had dropped 4 of their last 5 games. Their once secure playoff cushion had started to evaporate. 6th place in the standings sounds comfortable until you realize Seattle was breathing down their necks and the Sparks were lurking just 2 games behind. In other words, one misstep and the Fever could have fallen into freefall, and the opponent made it worse. The Sparks weren't just another team, they were a ghost from earlier in the season. Indiana had played them 3 times. 3 times, the Sparks walked away victorious. It wasn't just the losses, it was the way those losses happened. Frustrating collapses, missed opportunities, and a sense that Los Angeles had cracked Indiana's code. Every player on the Fever roster knew that history. They knew the whispers, the Sparks have their number. Add the weight of playoff implications, and this wasn't just a game, it was a psychological test. Think about the context here. 5 games left in the season. Every possession could tilt a playoff race that was tightening by the day. This wasn't about climbing higher in the standings, this was about survival. The Fever weren't chasing the top seeds, they were fighting to stay alive in the dance. One loss here, and suddenly the Sparks would smell blood. That narrative of Indiana collapsing late in the year, a narrative that had started creeping into conversations, would have taken center stage. The players knew it, the coaches knew it, even the fans at home knew it, and that's what made the performance so gritty. Indiana didn't come into this game with the luxury of playing pretty basketball. This wasn't about style points or flashy highlights. It was about execution under duress. It was about digging in when the legs felt heavy and the lungs burned. It was about managing emotions in a building where every LA run threatened to blow the doors off. When you're in a situation like that, survival basketball is ugly basketball. Every trip down the floor is a test. Every rebound is a battle. And every defensive stop feels like oxygen. That's why when Aliyah Boston ripped away that final possession in the last seconds, it wasn't just another play, it was the exclamation point on a night defined by urgency. The Fever didn't just win a game. They passed a gut check moment that could have unraveled their entire season. And in doing so, they reminded the WNBA that while they may not yet be a polished powerhouse, they're already a battle-tested squad that won't fold under the weight of playoff pressure. Sometimes, the most powerful stories in sports aren't written in the stat sheet, they're written on the faces of players who refuse to quit. For Indiana, that symbol was Lexie Hull. 2 black eyes, a bruised face, a collision with Gabby Williams in the previous game that left her looking like a fighter who'd gone 12 rounds in the ring. Most players in her position would have sat out, citing caution, recovery, or simple comfort. But Lexie Hull didn't just show up. She fought, she clawed, she battled through every possession as if those injuries were nothing more than scratches. Think about what that communicates to a locker room. When your teammate walks onto the floor, visibly bruised, visibly battered, and still dives on the hardwood for loose balls, still chases defenders through every screen, still contests shots with the same fire, how do you not rise to her level? Her presence wasn't about scoring points or filling up the box score. It was about embodying resilience. It was about telling the rest of the team, if I can give this much, then you can too. Hull's story goes beyond just the bruises. After the game, she admitted she had gone through all the concussion and fracture checks. She knew the risks, she knew the pain, and still, she said she was relieved. It wasn't worse relieved she could play. That kind of mentality doesn't just inspire teammates, it redefines a culture. Coaches can preach toughness, teammates can talk about grit. But when one of your own literally lives it, when she turns pain into fuel, it becomes contagious. And you could see it play out possession by possession. Hull may not have been the one hitting the clutch shots like Odyssey Sims or dominating the paint like Aliyah Boston, but she was the glue player who embodied the Fever's identity that night. Every time she hit the floor chasing a rebound, the bench roared. Every time she fought through contact, the crowd watching back home felt it. And every time the Sparks thought Indiana was vulnerable, Hull reminded them this team was going to make them earn every inch. In sports, you need more than stars. You need symbols, players whose actions say what words can't. Lexie Hull became that symbol in Los Angeles. 2 black eyes, 0 excuses. A relentless competitor who refused to let the Fever back down. She may not have headlined the highlight reels, but her fight was the heartbeat of Indiana's playoff clinching win. Here's the truth about Indiana's playoff clinching win. It wasn't pretty. In fact, at times, it was downright ugly. Missed shots, sloppy turnovers, awkward possessions where the offense seemed stuck in mud. But here's where the Fever showed what makes them dangerous. They embraced the ugliness. They didn't panic when the shots stopped falling. They didn't collapse when the Sparks went on runs. Instead, they leaned into the grind of survival basketball. And it's that mentality that turned an ugly game into a beautiful statement about who they are. In games like this, the margin for error is razor thin. Every possession feels like life or death. One missed rotation, one lazy rebound, one careless turnover can swing the entire outcome. And yet, Indiana never folded. They clawed through possessions, turned deflections into opportunities, and made every single trip down the floor matter. Their defense wasn't glamorous, but it was relentless. Their rebounding wasn't clean, but it was desperate in the best way. They didn't play to impress, they played to endure. Look at the way they adjusted. Kelsey Mitchell, their leading scorer, struggled to find her rhythm. Shots weren't falling at the usual clip, and normally, that spells doom for Indiana's offense. But instead of letting that sink them, others filled the gaps. Aliyah Boston turned into a facilitator when needed, finding cutters and moving the ball. Odyssey Sims became a steadying presence, willing to take the shots no one else wanted. And on the defensive end, everyone chipped in. Deflections, steals, hustle plays, they all added up to something bigger. This is the type of basketball casual fans often dismiss, but insiders know how valuable it is. You can't play 40 minutes of perfect basketball every night, but what separates contenders from pretenders is how you perform when the game turns into a fistfight of effort and endurance. The Fever didn't just match the Sparks' intensity, they exceeded it. Every rebound Lexie Hull chased, every loose ball Aliyah Boston secured, every deflection that turned into a turnover, it all chipped away at Los Angeles' willpower. By the fourth quarter, it wasn't Indiana's offense that was winning the game, it was their refusal to break. The Sparks had every opportunity to slam the door. Momentum was there for the taking. But the Fever hung on with just enough stops, just enough rebounds, and just enough grit to keep the window open for a hero to emerge. And that's the real beauty of ugly basketball. It exposes who wants it more. The Fever wanted it more. That hunger, that willingness to win ugly, is what carried them through 40 minutes of chaos and gave them the victory that now defines their season. Every playoff chase needs a hero. On this night in Los Angeles, that hero wore the #1 jersey and brought nearly a decade of professional experience with her. Odyssey Sims didn't just step up, she took over. And what makes her performance so captivating is that it came not from a superstar expected to dominate, but from a veteran role player who understood that in a game of survival, sometimes the moment demands you seize it. Sims scored 20 points, and while the box score tells you she was effective, it doesn't capture the weight of those buckets. These weren't meaningless shots in the second quarter or garbage time layups, they were timely daggers. With the Fever's offense sputtering and Kelsey Mitchell struggling to find her shot, Sims became the anchor Indiana desperately needed. Possession after possession, she brought poise, control, and a refusal to let the Sparks bury her team. Watch the way she attacked. There was no hesitation in her drives, no fear in her pull-ups. Every jumper carried the confidence of someone who had been in these moments before, someone who knew the stakes and relished them. That's the value of veterans in high-pressure games. They don't blink. Sims wasn't overwhelmed by the playoff-like intensity, nor by the fact that Los Angeles had beaten Indiana 3 times earlier this season. Instead, she thrived in the chaos. And the timing couldn't have been more crucial. For much of the season, the Fever have leaned on their young core, Boston, Mitchell, Melissa Smith, but youth can wobble under the crushing weight of must-win games. On this night, it was the steady hand of Sims that guided them through. She wasn't just scoring points, she was setting a tone. Every time she hit a shot, you could feel the collective confidence of her teammates rise. Every time she held her composure in the half court, it slowed the Sparks' momentum and gave Indiana a chance to breathe. This was the kind of game that rewrites narratives. For months, skeptics questioned Indiana's depth. Critics asked if they had enough reliable options beyond their stars. Odyssey Sims answered that question emphatically. She wasn't just another body in the rotation, she was the difference maker. The X factor who transformed a desperate fight into a defining triumph. When the clock hit 0, Sims didn't just walk away with 20 points. She walked away having solidified her role as the steadying veteran presence the Fever needed at the most pivotal moment of their season. And in the grand story of Indiana's rise, this performance will be remembered as the night Odyssey Sims reminded everyone that sometimes it's the veteran who writes the chapter that keeps the story alive. If Odyssey Sims was the steady veteran hand guiding Indiana through the fire, then Aliyah Boston was the wall of steel that prevented Los Angeles from crashing through it. The rookie center, already crowned Rookie of the Year, showed the world why she isn't just the future of the Fever, she's the foundation they're building everything upon. In a game defined by grit, Boston's defense became the ultimate difference maker, capped by the single most important play of the night, the game-saving steal. Let's set the scene. The Sparks had momentum, clawing their way back with the home crowd roaring behind them. Indiana's slim lead was hanging by a thread, and it felt as though one more basket by Los Angeles could tilt the balance permanently. That's when Boston delivered the kind of moment that separates good players from generational ones. She read the passing lane perfectly, extended her hand, and stripped the ball clean, turning what could have been a game-time possession for the Sparks into a lifeline for the Fever. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was monumental. Defense doesn't always make headlines, but it wins games. Boston's ability to anchor the paint forced the Sparks into uncomfortable shots all night. Nneka Ogwumike, one of the most versatile and dominant forwards in the league, had to work for every inch of space. Every time Los Angeles tried to attack inside, Boston was there, arms wide, body unmovable, disrupting rhythm and altering shots. Her presence alone changed the geometry of the game. The Sparks were constantly forced into Plan B because Plan A, scoring at the rim, was locked away. And here's the beauty of her steal. It wasn't luck. It was anticipation, awareness, and a defensive IQ far beyond her years. Great defenders don't just react, they predict. Boston had been studying the Sparks' movements all game, watching their sets, waiting for the right moment. When it came, she didn't hesitate. She executed. That's championship caliber defense, the kind that transforms pressure into poise. But her impact went beyond just that one play. Boston's rebounding was a clinic in positioning and determination. She tracked balls off the rim with precision, snatched them out of crowded spaces, and reset Indiana's control of the game. On a night where every possession mattered, her ability to secure the glass was as valuable as any bucket scored. What's most striking is how natural she makes it look. Rookie centers aren't supposed to dictate playoff intensity games like this. They're supposed to be learning, adjusting, still finding their footing. But Boston has fast-forwarded that timeline. She's not just learning the league, she's already reshaping it. The Sparks threw everything they had at her, and she answered with composure and dominance. When the final whistle blew, Odyssey Sims' points may have stolen the highlight reel, but it was Boston's steal that preserved the victory. That single defensive stop encapsulated who she is, a player who doesn't just play in the big moments, but owns them. And for Indiana, that's the most reassuring sign of all. Their future isn't coming, it's already here. For most of the season, the Indiana Fever's offense has run through Kelsey Mitchell. She's the team's leading scorer, the engine of their attack, and the guard opponents circle in red on scouting reports. So when Mitchell struggled against the Sparks, hitting just a fraction of her usual rhythm, many would have assumed Indiana's playoff hopes were dead on arrival. And yet, the Fever didn't just survive her off night, they proved that they're more than a one-woman show. Let's be clear, this wasn't Mitchell at her best. Shots she normally drains with ease rimmed out, drives that typically slice defenses open got walled off. She looked frustrated, at times even pressing to force the offense back into her hands. But here's where the story shifts instead of collapsing. The Fever's supporting cast rose to the occasion. Odyssey Sims carried the scoring load, Aliyah controlled the paint, and Lexie Hull provided defensive hustle that doesn't show up in stat sheets. Indiana didn't lean on one player, they leaned on each other. And that's the real revelation of this game. Depth wins championships, and Indiana showed they finally have it. Earlier this season, if Mitchell had an off night, the Fever were almost guaranteed to lose. The offense sputtered without her, and no one else consistently stepped up. But this time was different. Sims dropped 20. Boston's defense suffocated the Sparks. Even Nalissa Smith, though quieter than usual, contributed valuable rebounding and spacing. It was a collective effort that silenced every critic who claimed Indiana was too reliant on one scorer. This moment matters because it changes the narrative around the Fever. Great teams are built on trust. Teammates must know that if the star falters, someone else can step forward. By winning without Mitchell carrying the scoring burden, Indiana sent a message. They are not just Kelsey Mitchell and the rest. They are a unit capable of adapting when things don't go according to plan. That makes them exponentially more dangerous in high-stakes games. Mitchell's struggles, in a strange way, became a blessing in disguise. It forced others into the spotlight and proved that the Fever can withstand adversity without their leading scorer firing on all cylinders. And for Mitchell herself, this might be even more freeing. She doesn't have to carry the weight of the world every night. She can trust that her teammates will step up, that the responsibility is shared, not shouldered alone. By the time the final buzzer sounded, it didn't matter that Mitchell's stat line wasn't glowing. What mattered was the win. And for Indiana, this victory wasn't just about securing playoff positioning, it was about proving that their future is built on depth, resilience, and balance. Mitchell will have her nights again, no doubt. But on this night, her struggles revealed something far more valuable. The Fever aren't dependent on one player anymore. They are a team. There's something about sports that makes repetition feel like destiny. For months, every time Indiana saw the letters LA on the schedule, the ending seemed already written. 3 meetings, 3 losses. Each time the Sparks found a way to slam the door shut, as if they owned the script and the Fever were merely side characters in their own story. But on this night, with the season hanging in the balance, Indiana ripped the pen from LA's hands and rewrote the ending. This wasn't just another game, this was a confrontation with history. Losing to the same team 3 times builds a mental wall. It plants doubt, the kind that whispers, maybe they just have our number. And for the Sparks, that narrative was already forming. They weren't just confident coming in, they were comfortable, believing Indiana couldn't solve their puzzle. That's what makes this win seismic. The Fever didn't just beat Los Angeles. They shattered the weight of the past and proved they can flip the script when it matters most. Think about the symbolism. The Sparks, a franchise with banners in the rafters, facing the Fever, a young squad clawing its way back to relevance. In the first 3 meetings, that experience gap showed. Indiana looked hesitant. They looked overwhelmed. But this time, they looked fearless. They played like a team that understood the stakes and refused to let history repeat itself. And that's what breaking a curse feels like. It's not just about winning a basketball game, it's about shaking off the ghosts that linger in your head. When Sims hit her shots, when Boston made that steal, when the final buzzer sounded, it wasn't just about the scoreboard, it was about validation. Indiana finally proved they could conquer the team that had haunted them all season. More importantly, this win could have ripple effects. Momentum in sports isn't just physical, it's psychological. By breaking through against the Sparks, the Fever gained something intangible but priceless: belief. Belief that no opponent has an unbreakable hold over them. Belief that past results don't dictate future outcomes. Belief that when the playoffs demand it, they can rise above patterns and expectations. For Los Angeles, this loss will sting more than most. They had a chance to cement their dominance over Indiana, to sweep them and send a message. Instead, they watched their control unravel. And for Indiana, the emotional weight of finally breaking free can't be overstated. This wasn't just a victory on the road, it was a symbolic emancipation from the grip of defeat. When the Fever left the court, they weren't just walking out of Crypto.com Arena with a win. They were walking out having broken a cycle, having exorcised a demon, having proven to themselves and the league that history is not destiny. Sometimes, all it takes is one game to change everything. When the Indiana Fever walked off the court with a win against Los Angeles, it wasn't just about climbing the standings or putting another W in the record books. No, this was a statement, a declaration that Indiana has stepped out of the shadows of irrelevance and into the heat of the playoff chase. For a franchise that has spent years rebuilding, enduring criticism, and fighting through countless setbacks, this victory feels like a defining turning point. Playoff implications are obvious. With only a handful of games left, every win matters. Every possession matters. The Fever entered the night knowing a loss would have put them on the brink of elimination. Instead, the win against the Sparks breathed new life into their campaign. Suddenly, they're not just fighting for survival, they're fighting with momentum, confidence, and a real shot at securing one of those coveted playoff spots. And in sports, timing is everything. To peak in late August, that's the difference